Welcome to another in our spotlights on the Scottish letting scene, and I'm joined now by Sean Hooker, Business Development at My Deposits. And My Deposits are in Scotland now, aren't they? How's it going up there?
How's it going at the moment? Yes, it's going well. You know, the legislation and the schemes have only been operating now for a few months,
yes.
And so it is a bit of an awareness exercise at the present moment. So My Deposits Scotland are up there in Scotland trying to educate landlords and letting agents that this legislation is coming into force. And we're coming up to a big date for the Scottish legislation. There was a kind of a bedding in period, and the first key date is November the 13th for getting most of the deposits over and into a custodial scheme.
Yes, because that's quite a significant change for them, isn't it?
Very much so, very much so. I mean, all new tenancies will now have to be protected, but eventually all the deposits that are being held will have to go into a custodial scheme. So landlords have got to actually be aware of this, because pretty much after the 13th of November, the sheriffs will be out there and tenants will be able to take the landlord or their letting agent to a sheriff, and there are quite heavy penalties if you don't comply with the legislation.
Yes, it's quite black and white, isn't it?
Absolutely, very black and white, and I think a lot of landlords will get a very nasty shock if their tenant takes them to court and they haven't protected it in the correct way.
And what's the deadline for lettings agents to get the deposits? And it's retrospective deposits.
It's retrospective. So if you are using a letting agent in Scotland, the legislation is pretty much the same. So most of those deposits that were protected after the legislation came out have to be done by the 13th of November. There's a little bit of an extra time up to the following January to get the ones that have go back quite a few years. And it's going to be quite, the onus will be on the landlord to actually go to their letting agent to make sure that they comply, because ultimately it'll be the landlord that will be liable for that if the landlord hasn't got the agent to put it in. So ignorance will not be an excuse.
Well, that's such an important point, Sean, because part of the point of the spotlights that we're doing for Nows on Scotland is to reach out to the lettings community in Scotland, because I think education has got to be paramount, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Do you think it's a positive thing?
I think it's like anything else. It will take a little time to bed in.
Yeah.
These things tend to go with three little stages. The first one will be the painful part of complying.
Yes.
And people will be caught out, unfortunately. But it will be like getting used to and getting into the habit of getting your deposit into the custodial. Then there'll be a kind of modification of behaviour as well. There are things, little practices that are going to have to change, little areas that you're going to actually have to adapt your processes to, and the way that you deal with your tenants to make sure that you're complying with the legislation. And then eventually people will embrace it, and people will turn around and say, well, actually it's good for the industry because it nurtures that environment of a safe market in which a consumer, the tenant, can come into, and they can have trust in the landlord that they're using.